Okay, let's talk about Envision, because it's a company that has been around for a while, and I have to say, in a lot of ways, are the cutting edge when it comes to really cool AI technology and using, I think, technology that is out there right now that's been available for a while to its most useful, Shaun.
Oh, yes, there's no doubt. Envision are the granddaddies of accessible wearables, aren't they? I mean, you could argue Ira came out with Horizon, but it didn't really last. And the Envision glasses were really the first ones to bring a standalone device with the Google glasses with their software.
Yeah, and Ira were a different ballgame, right? They were doing different things.
Yeah, of course.
I know Ira had AI in the name, but it kind of moved away from AI, interestingly. Anyway, let's get one of those granddaddies online. I don't know if that's a great way to start the interview, Shaun. Karthik Kannan's with us from Envision. Are you happy to be a granddaddy? Are you a granddaddy? Have you left yet?
Well, I've just stepped out to get my dentures on.
I'm so sorry. I meant a granddaddy of tech,
Yeah,
of course.
yeah, no, I mean, you meant like grand space daddy, it's just not like
Yes.
granddaddy. Yeah, so that's a title I'm okay to take on. But yeah, we've been around. We've been really stuck on this wearables idea, right? I mean, we started off in 2017 as an app, on a smartphone, but even the earliest designs of Envision basically, we were just like two 20-year-old kids who just assumed that you could, walk into a factory in Shanghai and say, "Can you make this hardware for me?" And they would do it, and then we'll sell it, and then all of a sudden everyone's wearing. So I mean, we had a design that looked very very similar to the AirPods of today, and that was our assumption. That we would be able to walk into a Chinese factory and then ask them to build this thing with all the processors and AI processors and cameras and speakers built into this little AirPod style device, and they would just do it for us. And of course, we realized that the world works differently. Reality is a little bit more boring than.
Hang on, Karthik. That's not going to happen.
Yes.
Sorry, no. We'll need to rethink that one. And you're right. I mean, look, this is the challenge is, of course, the technology, and we've talked about this before, right?
Yeah.
There's so many great ideas, but technology is kind of hampering some of that. I mean, I'm wearing the Meta Ray-Bans right now. I know you've been blogging about them and talking about them as well, and they're brilliant. But of course, they do have their limitations, one being battery, for example, and processing power and all of that.
Yeah.
Look, before we get into all this, because wearables is obviously an area that we're fascinated in at the moment, but I want to start with you and talking about Envision Ally, because that's the big headline feature at the minute that I see you guys talking about. So what is Ally from Envision?
Sure. So Ally is our way of reimagining all of what Envision's been doing, right? So Ally, to put it very simply, is a very easy to use conversational personal assistant that you could be having on any platform that you care to use today. Right. Traditionally, the way we have used software is you open an app has buttons, and then you press these buttons, you learn how the app is structured, and you learn this button goes here, this button does that, and then all of a sudden, an overzealous designer comes around and changes everything once every 6 months, and you have to, learn the whole thing again, right? But the
Yeah.
way we see software evolve is changed, and because of AI and because of all the stuff that's happened over the last like 2 years, we can now take away all of that complexity and then put a very neat snappy conversational interface that revolves around all the functionalities and capabilities of the software, right? That's what we're doing with Ally. So Ally at its heart is still Envision. So you would still be able to read documents with it. You'll still be able to read all kinds of text. You'll be able to detect objects. You'll be able to recognize faces. You'll be able to do all of these things. But then instead of you having to learn, how the Envision app works and what button to press to get what, you just talk to it, right? You just talk to your Ally. Your Ally has a personality. So it's not this boring, AI bot that, some big corporation decides you should be having, and then you have it. You can basically, ask it to, I don't know, throw an expletive or two anytime you want to, right? You can have it, you can modify its personality. And it also learns a thing or two about you as you keep using it, right? And you can say, hey, I'm someone who's vegan, or I'm someone who likes to play this, or I'm someone who likes to go out for walks. And you can just keep talking to it, and then it just builds a memory of you over time. right? And then you can just go ahead and have you're sitting at a restaurant scanning a menu. It just tells you, hey, you know what? I think you're trying to go ahead and cut back on sugar, so maybe you should not have the desserts, right? Or maybe you're
What?
vegan.
Oh, great. So it's like my wife then, right?
Yeah,
Okay. Thank you.
exactly. Yeah,
Excellent.
I mean, it is a little bit like that. You could even like, give it a very girlfriendish personality. That's like, no judgments here, So
Hang on, Karthik. Hang on.
Yeah,
Hang on.
steady
That's a
on.
different ball game, right? Do you pay extra for that?
Where do I sign
yeah.
up?
Where do I sign? There's already a beta, available, so people could sign up for it as well. We'll talk about it in the end, but essentially that's what Ally
Mm.
is. It's and the good thing about Ally is it's not just stuck to your phone. It's not just stuck to your iOS device. It's not just stuck to your Android device. You can use Ally on iOS, Android, the web as well. It's available as a Chrome extension that you can install on your browsers. So let's say you are running on a website, and then all of a sudden you see images on the website that are not properly alt text labeled, right? Ally would do that for you, right? Let's say you're coming across a
Mm.
form and it's kind of inaccessible and it's kind of annoying to fill forms out nowadays. You could basically ask Ally to fill out the web form for you and submit it for you, right? It can go ahead, fill out the form, it can confirm the details with you, and then just go ahead and submit it on your behalf, right? So these are things that Ally can do for you as well on the web. And Ally is also going to be available on the Envision glasses. And if in the future we work with more wearable partners, we're going to make Ally available on those as well.
Okay, so many questions here. And I'm glad you mentioned filling out forms, because in one of the promotional videos I saw someone say, scan this receipt, and
Yeah.
then later on ask them to use the details in that receipt to fill out a form. I was wondering how they did that, how the multi-platform aspect worked, but you seem to have explained that. Basically, you've got a Ally account that you sign into no matter what the platform is, and it still remembers your profile and your previous conversations. Is that right?
Exactly. So you could basically very securely, feed Ally some, sensitive bits of information like, oh, this is my ID card, or this is like my passport information, or this is a receipt that I scanned, on my phone, right? And Ally would store them securely for you. And when you ask for it later on or want to refer to it, you can just simply say, hey, can you like pull up the receipt, from my lunch that I had today, right? Or can you like fill up this form and then, I give you permission to like also put in my passport information or ID information or whatever, right? And then just fills out the form for you and stuff. So yes, it is capable of remembering things when you ask it to explicitly remember things for you. So it just doesn't store any junk that you talk to over the course of this one in its memory. You ask for it explicitly to remember something, and then you ask for it to, like read it out back to you.
Recall that.
Recall that.
So,
Yeah.
so if I scan a receipt, for example, using Ally on my smartphone, I can then, when I'm filling out a form on a website, let's say, I could recall that information there and it would fill it out. Now,
Yeah.
that is actually a really cool, and I'm sure lots of people would love that. You mentioned inaccessible forms, and just filling out forms in general as a screen reader user can be real hard work. But the trouble is, we've been burnt by AI promises before in the past. Can this
Totally.
do this right now? Is this something, this function that I watched, is it
Yes.
capable of doing that right now?
Yes, so everything that you saw in the Ally video is real. And, we actually shot the video on a live demo of someone using it as well, right? And this is actually a feature, that we are currently private, testing right now. And it will be made available to all Ally users like when they sign up for a public beta.
This is a culmination of your work.
Yeah.
Sort of moving from what is Envision as an app and does have the buttons and does have the app and does have all the structure that you talk about, moving that into something like this where everything moves to that style. Is that where we're going here?
Exactly. So the main idea with Ally is that it's extremely easy to use. You can ask it for things and it will help you out with it if it's capable of doing that. And Ally is extremely also personal, and it also has different tools that it can use. Like the form filling thing is just one of the tools that an Ally is capable of. And Ally can also help you, for example, manage your calendar. right? So you don't have to use the calendar app. I don't know if it's entirely accessible or not, or how annoying of a task it is. But even for someone who's sighted, just managing your calendar, that becomes a problem. And just being able to have Ally access information from your calendar is something that it can do. So essentially, what we're doing is we're saying all the capabilities that Envision has, like being able to read text or being able to describe a scene or being able to like recognize a face. We're just taking all of that and then just putting it behind this little, friendly, face, a friendly ally. And then all you have to do is just talk to it, and then it will tell you, hey, okay, probably you're trying to read a menu. So let me just pull up our scan text functionality and then scan the document for you before you can ask it a question, right? So those are things that Ally would do. It is a culmination of our work. It's also a belief that we have at Envision that software fundamentally is going to change in the future. This whole idea that has been existed for like 30, 40 years of computing, where you have buttons and menus and layers of menus, that is going to be abstracted away in a much more easy to use interface that is able to understand what you're trying to say in natural language.
Let's hear it in action.
Hi, my name is Jesse, and today I'm going to show you how my personal AI assistant helps me throughout my day. My personal AI assistant, called Ally, runs on my smartphone, on the web, and on my Envision glasses. It knows about my schedule, my preferences, and it also knows about my surroundings. So let's begin. Hey Ally, should I wear a jacket today?
No jacket needed, Jesse. It's 23 degrees in The Hague. Good luck with your lunch meeting.
When is the train to Amsterdam leaving, and from what platform?
Envision is answering your question. A train to Amsterdam is leaving at 12:36 from platform 6.
So, what are you up to? Shall we order some food?
Yeah, let's maybe.
Do you have a recommendation for a salad?
All right, Jesse, since you aim for a healthy diet and you're lactose intolerant, I'd recommend the gegrilde Groenten salad. It's got grilled veggies like cauliflower, zucchini, and beetroot with sweet potato and hummus, plus it's vegan. You won't have to worry about any dairy sneaking in there.
Okay, I got this. Remember this receipt for me. Hey Ally, can you recall the receipt that I took a picture of earlier today and fill in this form?
Left parenthesis. Heading level 1. Reimbursement and invoice submission. Email and photo. Jesse Winterholz. Lunch at a restaurant with a client and spent €43.25. The 29th of July 2024.
Yeah, that sounds good. What's my gym routine for today?
The day you find out if you're really dedicated or just enjoy torturing yourself. Better buckle up, Jesse. Tomorrow walking might just be an extreme sport.
Leg day again.
I mean, that sounds great, and I love the personalities in there and all of that. I mean, it's just so good, and I think that whole personalization thing that we talked about before, Karthik, when you were last on with us, it's going to be groundbreaking for blind people to just talk to their devices and get meaningful responses and get actions out of it as well. The question I have, though, is you mentioned earlier about providing personal information. How safe is this? How secure is our data with Envision and this service?
Sure. I think we have a lot of experience in that field, in that space, because, one, we are a company that's based out of, Europe, and Europe is known for its regulations at this point. We have, and we are fully GDPR compliant as a company, right? So we do take data privacy quite seriously. And we also are an EU medical device, like the Envision glasses is EU medical device registered, which basically also means that we have to meet a lot of very high safety standards for, data and like managing data and things like that. So I am, I as an end user can be extremely confident that Envision is not really going to sell my data to some third party, or it's not going to go ahead and use my data to sell me ads or any such thing. We don't do any of that at all. We don't intend to do it as well. The main reason why we anonymously store user information from consenting users is to basically improve our models that we have done over the course of the years, right? So that's the only thing. And then when the data is used to train models, we basically train the latest model and then get done with the data that was used to train the model, because we don't need that data anymore per se. Right. And the way we also store information in the backend is fully encrypted. And we try to store only information that's truly, truly necessary for us to store and stuff. Yeah.
Well, you mentioned the back end there. So What service are you using, if any, if it's not your own? Are you using to power the AI aspect? What's behind it?
It's a mix of a lot of things, right? It's a mix of what we have built over the years as to what we do best, and then it's a mix and then use third-party services wherever required. If I have to give you the example, for example, of our scan text functionality, right? Now, scan text in the glasses has like a whole flow to it. So when a user activates the mode to scan text with the scan a document with the Envision glasses, what happens first is that the glasses guide you on how to move the document before you can fully capture it, right? That is something that nobody else in the world has done at this point. So Envision had to build its own technology to do that because we know how to do that best, right? And then actually scanning the document is done through like a commercial API or like a proprietary API, because those guys, like the folks of the Microsofts and Amazons and Googles, they've got all the chops in the world to build like the best possible OCR API, right? So we just piggyback on that. And the next step in that process is trying to understand the layout of the document. So today's commercial APIs, no matter like how pricey you get, you make them, they're not very good at understanding the layout of a document. If you're trying to read book, columns, if you're trying to read a magazine article or a table, you can't just, if you run that through like these OCR APIs, they just spit out the text from left to right without any, adherence to the layout of the document. So Envision had to step in and really build our own technology in that space, which is where the real value addition is, right? So we really go there and we say, okay, let's build an AI that's able to understand headings and columns and tables and figures and charts and images, right? And so that we're able to extract those elements and then properly read them out the right way it's meant to be read out. So if you're, using the Envision glasses and you're on the 2024 pass, you will be able to now also read tables along with images and charts as well, right? So Envision is capable of doing that, and that is where we do our own technology. So it's a mix of things. As you can see, we use third-party stuff wherever needed and build our own technology wherever it's needed.
But in the terms of privacy, like you mentioned, if we go back to the example of using your, maybe I've got a picture of my passport to fill in some form. If it stays with you, you've put forward your privacy terms there. But does it ever get sent out to something like OpenAI or Gemini or another AI service? And then what happens to that from there?
No, so I think in terms of just being able to store images and save images that we're doing, it's all happening within Envision's own loop, right? So
Right.
we don't essentially take them out and then use it with a third party and stuff. And even when we do use it with a third party, we always ensure that we are on some kind of an enterprise setup with them, right? And when you're on, for example, a developer or an enterprise setup with OpenAI, for example, they don't store information that is being sent to their servers for training anyway, right? So they explicitly mention this in their contracts that they don't do that. So we try and use those tiers as much as possible, so that if there's sensitive information that we are that we want to have these additional third party AI services like process for us, we're always trying to do that within the space of like okay, can we make this or can we ensure that this data is not stored in any way, again just to comply with GDPR and other European data laws.
I've spoken to people who are currently on the beta for Ally. And I've got to say, the biggest thing that people tell me about, apart from the features, is as you mentioned earlier, you've took all the safety rails off this thing. It seems like you can get it to swear at you if you want. What made you go down that route? Don't get me wrong, people seem to be loving it, but what made it the right way for you?
I just think I think we always believe in giving people the ability to choose these guardrails for themselves, right? Of course, if someone were to ask, it to how do I make a bomb or something, it's not going to give you that answer, right? But what's the harm in letting it say, the F word, right? If that's how people express themselves in the real world, and that's how they want their allies to express themselves. Why not do it? And it does make it kind of more easy to interact with, and you feel less that you're talking to an actual machine, and more that you're talking to almost like a person or a friend of sorts, right? Which is why we also picked the name Ally. We didn't want to go with assistant, or we didn't want to use any of those other terms. Um, so yes, the idea is to just give people the ability to just, customize their ally as much as they want. And if they wanted to throw an F-bomb here and there, it's totally okay. Should be totally fine. And we shouldn't overtly
But
censor these models.
no, I'm with you. But do you think that actually opens it up to be more helpful, to give better answers when you take away those guide rails there?
Definitely. I think, if you're able to build an ally for yourself that you feel comfortable talking to, that you feel like, hey, these responses are a bit more I would say natural sounding, then I feel like it just makes it easier to interact with it, right? It makes it, I'm kind of loath to say the word more human, but it is
Mm.
what it is, right? I think you feel a
Yeah.
bit more like, hey, I'm just talking to, like, and the thing that we noticed is a lot of times people get very conscious when they're talking to an AI, right? When they're talking to a Siri, because usually they're kind of, the feedback that Siri gives you is, oh, I'm not able to understand what you're saying, like as if the problem is on you, right? But if we try and
Yeah.
make the AI a bit more personal, a bit more, like friendlier, then, people have less barriers in talking to it, is what we realized during the beta.
Okay, there's an anxiety in talking to an AI because sometimes you feel
Exactly.
you're so busy thinking about what you're supposed to say in
Yeah.
order to get the result you want that you're not really having a conversation. You're just trying to form a coherent sentence, and your brain is kind of overloading and maxing out at 100%, or at least mine is. But I want to talk a little bit about wearables, because obviously that market is booming at the moment in so many different directions. And, we're coming up to the Meta Connect event. We're looking forward to that on the 25th. And a lot of us in the blind community are quite excited about it because, yes, I know they're going to announce some new VR headset. I don't care about that. I'm more interested in what I'm wearing right now, which is these Meta Ray-Bans and where it's all going. And, I think Shaun and I are sitting here every day doing this show and, feeling there's huge potential in these types of products that are coming out. And I just wonder, from your perspective, because you have written a lot about the Meta Ray-Bans recently, is a partnership possible between you guys?
Ooh, never say never. I'm just gonna say that. Never say never. Stay tuned for the Connect event. Yeah, that's all I can say right now. But
Mm.
broadly speaking, I'm very, very excited about wearables. I'm very excited about the Envision glasses in its current form, because there is just so much more that we can still do with these glasses, which is the reason why we're still actively putting them out, putting out updates and improving on it, because there's just so much room to do that. At the same time, we're seeing that the space is starting to open up. Of course, Ray-Ban Meta is one of them. The main problem that we see with these wearables that are coming out today is that they're not open for developers yet. Because of that,
Yeah.
there is very, very limited capability that you can, use these glasses for. Even if you're blind or low vision, most of the people that I've seen kind of like use the Meta AI, and then they get like brief descriptions or descriptions that are not helpful. Another reason why, we need to have like AI that's not overtly censored is because, again, if a blind or low vision person asks Meta AI to describe how another human looks like or who this person is, or even reading documents, right? It refuses to read documents that has names and numbers on it. It's not really built with accessibility in mind. So as more wearables come out and as they can actually open up to developers like Envision, we can make full use of what the capability of those devices are. And so I'm excited for it from that perspective. But I still think there is some way to go before these wearables can kind of match up to what we have today in terms of the Envision glasses hardware itself, right? And what I love about the hardware is it's so open that developers like
Mm.
us can take it and then just put our own software on it and then instantly make it usable for a blind or low vision person. Whereas with these new wearables that are coming out, they're cheap, they're great, they look quite good. And if you asked me from 3 years ago, if I was sitting on the show and looking at what you're wearing, I'd say, okay, that's a normal pair of Ray-Bans, right? But we
Yeah,
know that's
yeah.
like that's not. And so it's great, but I still think it has some way to go. And yeah, I mean, I'm personally very, very excited for the Meta Connect event this year. Very excited.
With the Envision app running on a smartphone and then being connected to some sort of wearable with a camera, no matter what it may be, Meta, Celeste, Ergo, no matter what it is, the power of the smartphone is probably more than you would find in a standalone wearable that you could
Yeah.
fit in a wearable solution. So are you, I mean, it just seems like, of course, look, Envision on the Google Glass, the thing that everyone talks about is the price. The price point is, it's got to be, it's a considered purchase. So if you could bring that down and bring in, the subscription model for the software, because as you mentioned with Ally running on any platform, it's the software that you're running there that makes the difference. That's the real power behind it. So I'm wondering if that's where you're looking for in the future, rather than, more people that could subscribe to a service rather than people being almost limited by the price of the hardware.
Oh, that's so true. And I think we've over the years, yes, we have made considerable effort to bring down the cost of the glasses from what it was to what it is right now. But you're right, it is a considered purchase. And we have looked at options. For example, there are like wearables out there where you can connect the glasses itself to a phone, and then have the phone do the processing for you, and then just give you the result back onto the glasses, right? We've experimented a lot with those type of glasses over the years, and believe me, we would have switched to those kind of models if it was more affordable, but still reliable enough, right? The problem again with those kind of glasses is that operating systems like Android and iOS are quite closed. And contrary to popular belief, they're becoming more and more closed every year. The reason for that is, as more people use phones, a lot of a lot of hackers and people like that tend to target smartphones now more than they do desktops and all those things, right? So, they do have considerable risk in opening up their operating system to be used, by a third party service like that. So there is very limited support from these companies for these third party wearables where you just take a pair of glasses, connect them to a phone, and then do all the processing there. Right. Unless, of course, Apple or Google comes out with their own version of glasses tomorrow, and then they allow you to securely talk between the phone and the camera and the glasses. And from just having spoken to the folks at Google very closely, there's nothing like that in the works right now that is capable of doing that. Right? At least not the ones have informed us of so far. So I think it's a bit of a dilemma. Yes, we do want to try and bring down the price point as much as possible on these glasses, but at the same time, having explored the possibility of connected wearables, it's still quite some time away. Especially like on Android, these type of devices only work with a limited range of phones. Like if you buy one of those connected wearable glasses where you connect it to a wire through your phone, one, it'll only work on Android. It'll not work on iOS, or it's super unreliable on iOS. And two, when it does work on Android, they say, oh, you have to buy like the latest Pixel device, or you need to buy like a Samsung Galaxy S24 or whatever, right? So you're dropping another 1,000 grand, just trying to buy one of these new devices that can connect to these, to these wearables. So it's a yeah, I would say we're in an adolescence phase, right? The smart glasses industry, 5 years ago, it was in its infancy, and then the whole adolescence phase started with like the Google Glass coming out again, and then more and more people are coming. Meta's right now there, so we're in the late teens, right now, and I'm sure another couple of years down the line, we'd start to see this maturing a bit more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Envision Ally is in beta, public beta.
Yeah.
When are we seeing that launch, do you think? And do you imagine that will have a subscription model?
Yes, it will have a subscription model of sorts. To be honest, we have to really finalize on those things, right? Right now, we're just focused on building the best possible experience. It's going to be in a public beta for a while. We just want to have as many people using the beta as possible, as many people putting the Ally through its paces, and also for us to kind of have a conversation with the community at large and understand from them, hey, what are the features that really matter to you, right? Like, how can we, we just I think the filling up the forms is one thing, right? Like, what are things like that? What are problems like that the Ally can actually help you with that you think are problems that you encounter throughout all the devices you use. So we really will do a little bit more of like having these conversations, and when we feel the time is right, we'll kind of launch this to the wider world as well. So yeah, it's going to be in public beta for a while, and so anyone who installs the app today basically can go ahead and try it out, give us feedback, and we'll do more of these in the coming weeks. And hopefully, as we go into the new year, we should be able to see this available for everyone to use.
Karthik, it's been wonderful talking to you as always. Come back soon and tell us more about what's going on. It's such an interesting area.
It is.
We will watch all of this with interest, and we look forward to hearing more because this just sounds fantastic. I love this. So thank you for coming on, Karthik.
Thanks so much. Thank you so much.
Time to talk back and Android, and don't worry, it's okay, Shaun. It's not that you and I are going to do this. We are going to bring in an expert
On Double Tap. Are you sure?
Well, I know it's since this whole YouTube thing. Yes. It seems to have gone up a gear. They want like experts and they want people on cameras, blind people on cameras. I mean, for goodness sake, let's bring in John Dyer. He's a talkback expert. That's what I'm calling him. John, how are you?
I'm good. How are you guys?
I'm good. I hear you've just started listening to Double Tap. That's
Sorry.
okay.
Mm-hmm. No, I had to get caught up on the recent events, so I'm glad your dog is recovering.
Thank you. Oh, very good.
Well done.
Very good.
That's
very
proof.
good. The dog is absolutely fine.
I had to prove it, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Stephen here.
That's
only a true
this,
listener would
then all you
know
have to do
this,
is
right?
like. It's like the West Wing episode where he has to say shibboleth. And if you want to, or otherwise nothing will of Double Tap. No man shall pass, or whatever the line was from noon Eastern. Since I've seen it. Anyway, AMI John, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for coming on. And we're going to talk about Talkback 15. Now, we did talk about it last week, of course, on our Monday episode. That was following the news that Talkback 15 is rolling out. I still haven't got it here, but this is a slow rollout, and people are a bit concerned about this, but you can explain this to people, right? This is something that rolls out over a period of time by Google.
Yeah, it can take up to 2 weeks. I guess their concern is if something goes horribly wrong and everybody loses speech, they can save half of them, right? So I guess that's why it rolls out slowly. I wish it was just, like Apple does it. Of course, Apple doesn't roll out VoiceOver through the store, but if they did, everybody would get it on the same day because that's how iOS works, right? But it's a little bit different in Android land.
So tell us about Talkback 15 and what's new. I mean, I know the headline feature. We've talked about it, and you can maybe give us a bit more detail on that. The headline feature, of course, being the news that you can get image descriptions through Google Gemini. So essentially fusing the Gemini assistant into Talkback. Now, that's a pretty cool feature. And have you had a chance to play with it and try it?
Yeah, so the way it works is in the same way you would use an app like Be My AI, Be My Eyes, to describe a photo, you can just have Talkback from within itself describe whatever's within the focus. So it doesn't even have to be a photo. It could be a drop-down menu that's not being accessible on a website. It could be, a button. It could be text. Anything, whatever's in focus. You can either bring up the Talkback menu to hit describe image, or you can assign a gesture to describe image. And when you do that gesture, it will take a partial screenshot, I guess, of whatever's within that focus, send it to the Gemini servers, and you'll get back a description of what that is.
Oh, right. I was thinking it was just purely for images, but no, that takes it to a whole new level, right?
Because it doesn't make everything completely accessible, right? Because there's some apps that are just so bad you can't even get things in focus, right? But if you can get something in focus, you can get a description of it, which is awesome.
And how do you enact it? How do you get it to work? Does it automatically do it, or do you have to swipe and choose it, or do a gesture or something?
So you can tap with 3 fingers or do the old-fashioned angle gesture of swiping down then to the right to bring up the talkback menu. And it's the first, they've moved it. It used to be way down in the menu. Now it's the first item in the menu. So it'll say describe image and you just double tap on that. If you prefer, you can go into the settings and customize your gestures to assign it to a specific gesture. So I just have it set to a 2-finger tap for me. So that's all I have to do to describe anything at any point. Yeah.
And is it limited to just what's in focus, or can you do the entire screenshot of the entire screen?
You cannot do from within TalkBack, you can't do the entire screen, but if you do have Gemini on the phone, you can ask Gemini anything about the current screen. So although that's not within TalkBack, you do have that functionality, or you could just take a screenshot and well, this is how I used to do it. This is why I love this feature so much, because I used to just have to take a screenshot of the entire screen, share that screenshot with something like Be My Eyes, and then try to figure things out from there. This is much easier than that, but you still have that option if you want to get the entire screen.
And I haven't really played with Gemini much at all. What's the description like? Is it, if you compare it, I think we've all got sort of the benchmark of Be My AI, which gives a really good detailed description. What's it like compared?
It's very similar. I mean, I took a picture of my wife and son in a restaurant, and it described them, their expressions, their hair color, what was on the table, what kind of food was there. It even does, and I'm not a fan of this, it will comment on, the mood of the restaurant or the stuff that's not details, but you know how these AI things are.
Yes.
And at this point, it doesn't seem to be tailored because, for example, if you're going to have Be My AI describe you something, the description is going to be more based on somebody who's visually impaired than if you sent that directly to ChatGPT, right?
Yeah.
But in this case, it seems like in this first iteration, there's really no difference. It's going to comment on the mood of the picture. It's going to, I was looking at a Mario Kart playset on Amazon, and it for whatever reason, after the description told me, this would be a great gift for any fan of the Mario franchise. Like,
really?
Okay.
Yeah. Wow.
I didn't need that information, but
Did you buy
everything else was great.
Buy now? Yeah, but that's, to be fair, I mean, Be My Eyes have put a lot of work into getting that tone right of who it's aimed for. Because if you ask the same question as you say to ChatGPT, it's all about the tuning of the prompts and things like that. So yeah.
But can you interrogate it further? I mean, like Be My AI. I know we keep saying like Be My AI, and I don't mean to do that. But this is the benchmark. It seems we're kind of basing all this on. Can you interrogate
at this point,
further?
no, you can't, because I'm a little disappointed because the way old descriptions used to work is it would just say it to you, right?
Yeah.
Now it pops up a window, and the first time I saw it, I was like, oh, it's popping up a window to tell me this, so there must be an edit box I can ask a question. But no, there's not an edit box right now. Hopefully that's something they're planning on adding in the future, because that would make it great, especially because if you want the exact text out of something, it does that AI thing where it just summarizes it, and it says, if there's too much text, it says this is about the following subject, and it just kind of picks and chooses what it wants to tell you. Similar to what Shaun mentioned last week about his, I think it was last week, about the Meta AI. Like he wanted to, or the Meta glasses, he wanted it to read everything on the menu, and it was just summarizing, the menu. So it sort of does that right now. You can't get it to give you the text exactly. So I would imagine if there was a prompt, you could say, just tell me the text.
So I guess my question is, would you still rather send the image to Be My AI rather than using Gemini?
It depends on the situation, really. Yeah.
Because I suppose it's like you've got this great app there that can do it, but you have to, you have to share that image with it. In some cases, that can be quite tricky to do. I mean, it could be a screenshot. That's one way of doing it. But essentially, you have to go out of the app you're in, go to another app, import the image, all that stuff. And these are time-consuming activities, right? If you just want to know what the description is.
For my workflow, it's been about, I'd say probably 90% of the time, I just do it in TalkBack. If I know I'm going to want to ask something specific, I won't bother with TalkBack because I've kind of like gotten used to what the description is going to be like. It's awesome in certain situations, right? But you know, if I want to ask, if I know I'm going to need specific information, I will still use Be My AI for that.
It would be cool, I guess, if it just sent it straight over to the Gemini app and opened it as a, you know, already asked question, so you could follow on.
Yep.
Maybe that's
That
something
makes sense.
that'll come. Yeah.
Hopefully.
So, just detaching Gemini from TalkBack for a second, have you played much with it? Getting a sense of how it works and how it behaves?
I'm kind of forcing myself to. I'm.
Don't force yourself.
Yeah, because Google's doing this thing where they want Gemini to replace Google Assistant, but in its current iteration, it can't do everything Google Assistant can do. So I've been reluctant to jump over to it, but you know, within the past month or so, I've just replaced Google Assistant and I've gotten used to using Gemini. So I mean, it is helpful for, you know, just information. If you just want information, obviously, always double check the work because these things can hallucinate all the time. So, but it is, if you just want to know something really quickly, it's awesome. That's what I use it for mostly. Yeah.
And how about TalkBack itself? TalkBack 15 specifically. So we know this is the feature that everyone's talking about, but
Yeah.
what else has impressed you or stood out to you?
To be quite honest, nothing.
Okay.
So TalkBack,
It's been great talking to you, John.
Yeah, thanks.
I'll tell you what's new. See, this is normal with TalkBack. They do not. I'm trying to think of the best way to say this. I don't think they have the manpower behind TalkBack that Apple has behind VoiceOver. You're not going to see. I mean, they've caught up in recent years, right? But you're not going to see as many features added in any given release. You know, and part of that is they have usually 3 releases a year. It's not like an annual thing. But so what's new in this one is you have, so this has been kind of controversial. It's just changes. Like it used to be, if you wanted to read continuously, you would have to, when you invoked continuous reading, it would read from the next item instead of the current item. That's changed. Most people, I think, are on board with that change. They like it reading from the current item first rather than the next item, even though we've been forced to do it the other way for forever. There's a couple new gestures with Braille on-screen keyboards or Braille displays for editing gesture, like to be able to select specific. You had selection control before, but specifically now you can select from your current cursor point to the beginning or to the end. That's what's new. There are new Braille display commands that I honestly don't know anything about because I don't have a Braille display.
Yeah.
And then there's more granular control over punctuation. It used to be on and off. Now you can set it to all, most, or some. So, just minor improvements like that. That's all I can think of off the top of my head.
I was telling you the other day, Stephen, that I feel almost like I need to learn and start again with Android and TalkBack because of these new gestures. You mentioned that, changing granularity, and there's all these, multi-finger gestures now, right? 3-finger swipe up and down. Does that change granularity or change options, and then left and right, and the 3-finger tap to bring up the TalkBack menu? I'm still using the angular gestures every time I pick up an Android phone because I'm stuck back in the past, really. And it feels like I need a refresher, like I need reprogramming almost to
He definitely
get these new
does,
gestures.
John. He definitely does.
Yeah,
In every sense.
What's happened over the years is, if you want to call it copying, fine, or if you want to call it like helping iOS users to transition over to Android,
That's a good spin.
they have added features from VoiceOver. So they added the multi-finger gestures originally, and this was just an Android problem because Android had so many different devices. Some were very cheap and didn't even have multi-tap functionality, and if they did have multi-touch, it was only 2-finger touch. So for the longest time, that's why we had angular gestures, because that was the best way to do multiple things on a screen where some devices just couldn't sense multiple fingers at one time. But that was a long time ago. So they have, I think it was in Android 11, so probably TalkBack 9.1 or 9.2, they added multi-finger gestures, and a lot of the gestures are similar to what you would find in VoiceOver. They're not by default. Most of them are not similar. So if you want to make it an Apple experience, you could assign swipe down with 3 fingers to go to the next page. You could assign swipe up with 3 fingers previous page, that sort of thing. But you don't have to use the angle gestures if you don't want to. I'm glad they're still there because I use them all the time and I love them. But I also love having multi-finger gestures. It's just more possibilities to customize.
But I must admit, I think the point that Shaun's making is the one that I was thinking about as well, which is that it almost felt like this was an old way of doing it, that somehow this has been superseded and we should know this. And yes, there are other gestures that have been added. But what you're saying is that those angular gestures are still very common, still used, and still promoted to some degree. I mean, they're clearly still there and functional. I think they're brilliant. I mean, I actually really like the angular gestures because it adds... I remember the very first time I tried them, I could not get my head around it at all.
Our memories up, down, left and right.
And you'd swipe down and you go left, and then that does... it didn't make sense. But then eventually when I got it, I'm like, this is the only way I'm ever going to use an Android phone now because I love it. But you mentioned something else about being able to change things. One thing that has matured massively in Android is the customization. You've got so much more in TalkBack now that you can do. You always could in Android more generally, but in TalkBack, you have got much more now in terms of customization of gestures, even going to, the Braille display, and even a Bluetooth keyboard or a wired keyboard if you wanted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it is. I'm glad that it's customizable because I think Samsung's voice assistant, what they used prior to TalkBack, was not customizable. Like you couldn't assign the gestures to do what you wanted. So it's definitely something I like. I don't think TalkBack is as feature rich or customizable as VoiceOver is. I feel like they have it backwards. Like I feel TalkBack has more of an iOS feel to it than and I think VoiceOver has more of a Android feel to it. And what I mean by that is I feel like VoiceOver is more user customizable, and you have much more voices to choose from. You have, someone told me recently, I don't know if this is in the beta or something, but you could have an equalizer for how you want the voice to sound. That just seems like so unnecessary. Like that's something Android would do. Just throw in features because you can.
So true. Yeah.
So they feel backwards from each other to me. I don't think. I'm happy with what TalkBack can do, but VoiceOver I feel like can do a lot more.
So interesting you say that, because we're constantly saying that there's a maturity between them both, and they almost feel like they're on a par. But it's so interesting to see someone who uses Android day in, day out actually point out those differences there, because it could be important, right? When I'm thinking about the customization of a screen reader on a mobile device, I'm thinking about changing voice settings per app, depending on what app's up, custom gestures and assigning them to specific features or actions. Those are the important things to me. And I assumed that they were there already baked into TalkBack, at least those two, which I consider the major customizations.
Yeah, and that's a good example, because TalkBack, you can't customize things per app. It's just however you set it, that's how it's going to be.
System-wide.
Mm-hmm.
But it does feel like all that will come, doesn't it? I mean, this is clearly an evolving screen reader. And look, I don't know about you. I personally wouldn't care either way if Google, as in Android and TalkBack in particular, almost copied VoiceOver and VoiceOver copied TalkBack, because there are benefits to both. Like, I would love angular gestures on my iPhone. You would like perhaps settings and more voices on Android. Okay, let's just make it happen. Why does it have to be a competition? Well, look, I've had time and spent quite a lot of time with Google's head of accessibility and Apple's head of accessibility, and on both occasions they say the same thing, which is, look, we just get along here. There's really no competition as far as we're concerned. around
they're
certain
not
features,
going to sue
perhaps.
each other over patents for accessibility features.
No,
you would hope,
and that's
right?
a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing because
Yeah.
look, for us, it's a basic level of access. So making this more accessible, so someone can make a decision. Hey, the new iPhone's too expensive. I can't afford it. I'm not buying it. I'm going to buy a cheaper Android phone because I feel I can get lots of cool stuff over there. And then when they do open up their Android phone, they find the same experience, as a blind user that a sighted person would. I mean, to me, that's when you think about it in that sense. You tap the screen, an app opens up. The same thing should happen on both phones. Now, I know it does, but what I mean is that ultimately you want to have a mirror, essentially, of access for abled people as much as disabled people.
Yeah, I think maybe TalkBack will get there someday. TalkBack development seems a lot slower than voiceover development for whatever reason. I mean, they don't even have an open beta. It's a closed beta for people in just the US, Canada, and the UK. Like you can't just get into the beta and start providing feedback in the same way you can on iOS. So
at least there's a group you can join. Just saying, there's a way you can get involved with the Trusted Tester program with Google that you can't do with Apple. That's sadly something that isn't open at all. So we just have to wait for the beta to come along and then feedback as best we can before the release happens. So I mean, I'm not suggesting for a second that Apple don't have blind people testing this. I know they employed blind people and they are testing with those people and others as well. They are doing it more in-house with their own team. And that's because Apple has that traditional, don't tell a soul anything until it's time to tell people thing, which is fine, although I don't love that aspect of Apple. But it seems with Google, they're more open to saying, look, let's open this up. Let's look outside of our bubble here and actually talk to blind people and get feedback. And when you tell me, but I would imagine when a new version of TalkBack comes out, we're not looking at as many bugs as we might see with iOS 18 coming up, for example. I mean, you tell me. Maybe I'm being fanciful here.
there are bugs. Yeah, there are bugs.
What is so interesting to me in this conversation, it's almost the grass is greener. I'm looking at Android thinking, I bet that hasn't got as many bugs, and it seems to get updated more than VoiceOver does. And you're saying the same thing back to me, John.
You notice the bugs you have to deal with, right, every day. So
yeah.
And I'm that way with everything. I want a Pixel, then I get a Pixel, then I want to go back to my Samsung phone, then I go back to my. You're right. The grass is greener.
Do you want to weigh in this Samsung story? Because we were talking last week, of course. We had Michelle Rahman from Android Authority on the show talking about reporting he had been doing on Samsung not getting TalkBack 15. And we've had a couple of comments from people who I don't think have listened to the full story that Michelle put forward to us, suggesting this was nonsense. In fact, yes, of course, you can get Android Accessibility Suite on Google or a Samsung phone, which is true, but you can't seem to be able to enable TalkBack without doing some kind of fancy developer command stuff in the background. First off, is that your experience? Is that true?
I would say most of what he said in that interview is true. The only thing that he might have been mistaken about is the fact that you can't have both versions functioning on a Samsung phone, because I have them both on my Samsung phone. I have one shortcut assigned to turn on Google's version and turn it off, and then I have another one assigned to turn on Samsung's version and turn it off. But what's true is that you can't get it to that point without connecting it to a computer and using Android Debug Bridge, developer software, basically, to get rid of Samsung's TalkBack, or Google's TalkBack won't show up in the settings to enable. That's basically what it boils down to.
Okay, yeah, which is what he was saying. You need to go into basically the ADB developer box and do it that way. But so how have you got it running simultaneously, or you're able to choose between which one?
Yeah, because once you get rid of Samsung's, Google's will show up in the accessibility settings. You can then assign it to an accessibility shortcut, which the iOS equivalent would be like assigning it to a triple tap of the side key, right?
Yeah.
And once it's assigned there, you could turn it on and off, and you can download Samsung's TalkBack from the Galaxy Store and reinstall it,
Ah,
and then you'll have both.
Okay.
And you don't really need to get into TalkBack settings through the accessibility settings, because you can, as long as you have it running, which you could turn on by the shortcut, you can then bring up the TalkBack menu, go to TalkBack settings there, and customize everything from within there. You don't really need to get to the accessibility settings. So you can get them both running, but you have to remove Samsung's to initially get Google's running.
And you simply just can't, uninstall the app through the default way
Right.
you would.
Right, that's why you need to use the Android debug bridge. Yeah.
So why is that though? Why
Yeah.
are they specifically
Sort of jumping on
locking
you on this one. Why is this, John? Tell us.
So so what's happening is Samsung's, so just to give a little history, Samsung used to have their own screen reader called Voice Assistant. And back in the day, you could choose to use Voice Assistant from the Galaxy Store, or you could choose to use TalkBack from the Play Store, and you could switch back and forth between the two. But ever since they did this merging of screen readers, Samsung has insisted on using their own version of TalkBack. And what it is they take Google's version and they add fixes to it. So they don't necessarily add their own features, but they just make it work better on their devices. I'll give you a couple of examples. If you're using Google's version of TalkBack and you try to use Bixby, that's Samsung's assistant, you press and hold the side key, and as soon as the mic opens up, if you have audio ducking enabled, TalkBack kind of interrupts it and Bixby stops listening. So you can't really use Bixby with audio ducking enabled. So that's something Samsung has fixed so that you can use Bixby. Another example would be the Samsung Galaxy Flip, the phone that folds shut and it has a little cover screen. Well, that cover screen it's its own little UI basically, and TalkBack kind of works with it, Google's TalkBack. So you can swipe between items, you can double tap on things and all that. But if you want to bring up the TalkBack menu, the menu won't appear on that screen. If you want to hide the screen, which is equivalent to the screen curtain in iOS, you could do the gesture and it'll say screen hidden, but the cover screen, it doesn't hide. It stays wide open for everyone to see. But what is hidden is the main screen. And Google doesn't have a folding device of this form factor like a Flip. They have a Fold, one that opens up into like a tablet, but they don't have one that folds down into a
clamshell,
device
basically.
with basically, a custom UI that has a custom UI on it. So Samsung wants to make sure these things are working on their device, and it comes with a cost, because they won't get the features right away. It takes Samsung, unlike Google, Samsung takes the iOS route and they release with the operating system. So you have to wait till you get the next version of Samsung's One UI before you get the next version of their TalkBack. So they might release like three versions year round. So they're usually at least 4 months behind as far as features. So I would imagine possibly by the end of the year, but maybe in the spring, Samsung will have these Gemini features baked into their version of Samsung's TalkBack. I wish they made it a little easier. Like, I wish you could just download TalkBack and they just said, are you sure you want to use Google's TalkBack instead of Samsung's TalkBack? So if you want the new features you because this is Android, right? We want a choice. Like, this is why we're on Android.
Exactly.
If we want to choose new
exactly.
features over stability, give us that option. So
I've got to ask you, John. So when you're turning on TalkBack using Google's Android TalkBack on your Samsung phone, are you noticing anything that isn't working properly? Are you noticing anything that essentially would be working properly if you were using Samsung's version of TalkBack?
only stuff related to Samsung's software. So like I mentioned, the Bixby has issues. The cover screen doesn't fully work correctly. But as far as like any of the features that Google has baked in, like Gemini works perfectly fine on the Samsung phone. It doesn't care what phone it's on. It will, if I do the gesture, it will send that portion of my screen to Gemini's server. So it will come back. It will tell me the description. It works perfectly fine. So it's just device specific things that I don't think either Samsung doesn't trust Google to fix before they release, or Google's not interested in fixing before they release, because I don't know what's going on behind the scenes, but that's basically what it boils down to.
Listen, it's been great talking to you, John. Now, you're part of the Blind Android Users podcast, is that right? And on their website as well, you contribute there?
Yeah, so if you go to our website, which is blindandroidusers.com, you can listen to our episodes, see where to subscribe. You could also just search for Blind Android Users on any podcast player, even Apple Podcasts if you want.
That's ironic.
Yeah, it is. You can also go to that website to, join our community. We have a Telegram group, we have an email list and Facebook group. But our partners are a website called accessibleandroid.com. And what we're hoping is that they're going to be like the Applevis of Android, because there really is no Applevis of Android for Android at this point. And, it's a community where you can submit content. They have written reviews of apps and phones. They write articles about, accessibility news. So, and two of their editors are regulars co-hosts on our podcast. So we kind of have a partnership with them. That's not our website exactly, but accessibleandroid.com. Definitely recommend you go check it out.
Yeah, I've looked for a long time for something like this, exactly for this reason, right? Because, one of the benefits of AppleVis is that it encourages people who don't know about the operating system, who are new, to find out about things, to ask questions, to engage with a community that's thriving. And I do not believe for a second there is not a thriving Android community out there, but it's hard to find those people and find them in one place, and especially when you're starting out. And you often feel like if you can walk into the wrong place and suddenly end up asking questions to a bunch of serious people about this stuff, and they just don't want to know about you starting out in your journey and how does this gesture work and how do I do this. They're just not interested. You need a place where you can go that everybody's willing to contribute. AppleVis, of course, is one such place, but there needs to be an Android Viz. Absolutely, I'm all for it. There you go. That's the Stephen Scott seal of approval right there. And that is worth nothing. But listen, thank you so much, John, for coming on. People should definitely go check out the Blind Android Users podcast and accessibleandroid.com as well. Available on an internet near you. John Dyer, thank you so much for coming on today to Double
Thank you for having me.
Thanks,
It's
John.
been fun.
Now go tell the Android people that we're nice people, okay?
All right.